Hello, you're watching BBC World News. I'm Adnan Nawaz with the headlines. Muhammadu Buhari is celebrating victory over Goodluck Jonathan in Nigeria's presidential election. It's the first time a sitting president has lost an election since the end of Nigeria's military rule in 1999. Talks on Iran's nuclear program taking place in Switzerland have been extended. The US State Department says several issues remain unresolved, but enough progress has been made to keep going. Israel says any deal would pave the way for the development of nuclear weapons. Journalists from France and Germany say they've seen mobile phone footage taken inside the Germanwings plane as it crashed in the Alps last week, killing all 150 people on board. Police in California say a man has been found dead at the Hollywood Hills home of one of the heirs to the Getty oil fortune. The Getty family has issued a statement confirming that the dead man is 47-year-old Andrew Getty.
BBC World News, your daily briefing on business and economics from the world's financial centres. From New Broadcasting House in London, World Business Report. Taxing times. The UK introduces the so-called Google tax today to try to make multinationals pay their share. And it sounds like a house party. Crowdfunding for property development is all the rage in France, but are you building on the sand or a rock? Hello, good to have you with us. This is World Business Report. I'm Sally Bundock. Also in the programme, companies in Japan show a lack of confidence. They're hoarding cash. We'll have the details from our team in the region. But let's start with companies operating in the UK but move their profits overseas to avoid paying tax will be subject to a new diverted profits tax from today. It's become known as well as the Google tax, and it's designed to prevent the likes of Google, Facebook, Starbucks, Amazon, Apple. There's a list is long of companies channeling the majority of their revenues made in the UK to international headquarters outside of the country. In many cases, the HQ is in Dublin, Ireland. So this new tax levy is 25% on money they make in the UK. It's higher than the 20% corporation tax levied in the UK, and is expected to be applied to companies whose annual revenues are more than £250 million. In Australia, the government is also finding a way for companies to pay the government sales tax there, which stands at 10%. And also there's an ongoing international effort. The UK is working with 5 other countries, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development as well, to get an international deal on taxing multinational companies who try and avoid paying taxes. Heather Self, a partner at the international law firm Pinsent Mason, says it's an interesting move made just before a general election.
I think it might well bring in more money for the UK in the short term, because if the UK's got tougher rules, companies will decide to pay a bit more tax here rather than somewhere else. But in the long term, there's a fear that other countries could say, well, we'd like a slice of that pie as well, and we could see UK companies facing more taxes overseas.
And how much revenue will it raise for the UK government?
The projection is 1.3 billion over 5 years, but only 25 million of that comes in this year, and 25 million is a drop in the ocean compared to the government's total revenues. I really don't see why they couldn't have given a bit more time to make sure they got this right.
In terms of, you know, the multinationals that will have to pay this tax in the UK, will clever accounting enable them to get around this or not?
I think the reason that companies will pay some more tax is that this is very much a pay now, argue later tax. HM Revenue and Customs can estimate how much tax they think should be payable. The company has to pay it up front and then has 12 months to agree what the right number is. Now, if somebody's sending you a bill, you might as well pay them a bit of money to go away. And I think the fear is that it is the UK not so much moving the goalposts as tilting the playing field in their favour.
And in terms of what the OECD is trying to put together and other international organisations, what is that likely to look like and how long will that take to come into being?
It's a 2-year project, so we're just over halfway through. It's due to conclude by the end of 2015. It's enormously complicated, but one of the things it's specifically looking at is the definition of trading in a country, what we call a permanent establishment. So there's already a big piece of work underway on that, and again, the UK has leapt ahead of that, which is worrying.
That was Heather Self there from Pinsent Masons. Just to say, of course, we'll keep you across all the twists and turns. The devil's in the detail on that story. Now let's move on to our series. We're looking at crowdfunding throughout this week. It's growing at a remarkable pace. And in France, it's being used to get into the real estate market rather than relying on corporations or institutional investors. Some French property developers are generating the cash through crowdfunding. Individuals are stumping up initial pots of cash, and once the developments have been completed and sold, the idea is, of course, they share in the profits. But as Hugh Schofield reports from Paris, many are looking at this idea through rose-coloured glasses.
In France, it's real estate which is suddenly seeing the colour of crowdfunders' money. In the last year, the number of internet platforms offering small investors the chance to get into building has shot up. One of the leaders in the field is Paris-based Anaxago, which today has 8 projects on the go and is pulling in €1 million a month from investors. To reassure customers who make average contributions of around €7,000, it says it offers only the best 10% of portfolios that it receives from developers.
To minimize the risk, we have a due diligence process with over 40 checkpoints, going from the track record of the property developer, the dynamism of the area, the insurance of the project, and we give all this information to the investors so that they can do their own due diligence.
The return offered by Anaxago and others is between 8 and 12% a year, far more than you can get by traditional investment. And because it's bricks and mortar, it looks as safe as houses.
But one thing about the French is that when it comes to financial products, they're not very sophisticated. Right now, there are lots of people who've caught the crowdfunding for real estate bug, and they're pouring their money in, but perhaps without fully appreciating the risks.
And these risks are manifold, according to some in the real estate industry, who warn that crowdfunders have been presented with an over-rosy image of what awaits them.
There is construction risk, there is risk that your project is not going to sell so well, there is risk that your permit might be attacked, there is all sorts of risk attached to typical real estate deal, which I don't think at this point people understand, or it's not presented to them very clearly.
Everyone agrees that crowdfunding has a bright future in French real estate. It's an opportunity for developers and for Joe Public. But the market is young and untested. Investors are warned to make their full calculations. Hugh Schofield, BBC News, Paris.
Now, from houses in France to factories in Japan, it would seem the big companies there are still pessimistic about the future. Let's go to Ali Moore, who's in our Asia Business Hub in Singapore. Ali, this is the Tankan survey. What does it say?
Well, it's a quarterly barometer, really, Sally, of the health of Japanese businesses. What it does is it asks every business how they're travelling. Are they planning to hire more people? Are they going to invest more money? And together, all that information helps the Bank of Japan decide whether the stimulus that it's pumping into the economy is hitting its mark. The news today, as you said, pretty underwhelming. The big manufacturers clearly worried about weakening demand at home and overseas. The level of confidence was unchanged from the last quarter, but the outlook for the coming 3 months came in below expectations, and companies are also planning to cut spending. On the optimistic side, the service sector saw an improvement in business conditions, and that's been helped by lower oil prices and also the lower yen, which has led to a surge in tourism, especially right now for the cherry blossoms. But all up, it's pretty clear Japan is still recovering from last year's sales hike, and it has to be said the Bank of Japan still has got a pretty fair bit of work to do to get people to open their wallets.
All right, thank you very much, Ali, in Singapore. Other business stories. Hewlett-Packard is suing Autonomy co-founder Mike Lynch and former Chief Financial Officer Sushavan Hussain for about $5.1 billion. HP is alleging fraud. US-based HP bought the UK software company in 2011 for just over $11 billion. It later had to write down the value of its purchase by 3/4. A decade of strong growth in Scotch whisky exports came to an end last year as overseas sales fell 7% according to new figures. The decline was blamed on a sharp drop in exports to the US, the biggest market for Scotch by value, where sales fell by 9%. Now, stay with us here on BBC World News because Business Live, our new show, is going to be on the air in about an hour's time. And as you can see, our chief executive today is the man in charge of Eurostar. Please send us your questions if you have them. I'm at Sally Bundock, BBC. See you soon.
Business Live is the new show that takes an international perspective on the business day.
From here in London, we'll look back at the big stories from Asia.
Get the latest from Europe.
And find out first what's ahead when the United States wakes up.
We'll bring it all together using the BBC's international network of business specialists to find out what it all means for all of us.
Business Live, weekdays on BBC World News.
We have left our professional camera kit at home and we are going to make the entire programme using just mobile devices.
I don't think this has ever been done before.
We need these things to behave like pro cameras.
8 o'clock in the morning and the phone's already dead.
This keeps the phones steady, so it doesn't look like that.
But for things to look pro, they also need to sound pro. And this is where the phones really fall short.
I tell you what though, if anyone can do it, these guys can do it.
Filmed something.
And then there's the editing.
It's Erid again. Last night they were up till 3 in the morning trying to edit something very, very short.
It's not allowing us to play those edits. Play! It's been a long, long day.
What we couldn't tell you about trying to make proper telly on mobiles.
With unprecedented access to an institution steeped in tradition.
This is for honourable and right honourable members to hang their swords.
In the lead-up to the British election, we take you behind the scenes of the Houses of Parliament.
Behaviour in there is just disgusting.
And find out what it's like to be at the heart of power.
There isn't a Wednesday that you don't feel total fear.
Questions to the Prime Minister.
Inside the Commons on BBC World News.
Hello, this is BBC World News and these are our top stories this hour. Supporters of the Nigerian opposition candidate Muhammadu Buhari are celebrating his victory in the country's presidential election. The nuclear negotiations with Iran are stretching into another day to see if the main parties can reach a deal. Some delegates say progress has been made. Journalists from France and Germany say they've seen mobile phone footage taken inside the Germanwings plane as it crashed in the Alps last week, killing all 150 people on board. Andrew Getty, one of the grandsons of the billionaire J. Paul Getty, has been found dead at his home in California. Time now for our news review. Sally and I are showing you what's making headlines around the world, and we'll start with the negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. They have been extended for an extra day, and Iran's Fars news agency has tweeted that the Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif believes an agreement is about to be drafted.
So that's a look at that tweet about those negotiations. Also very much across all the news wires at the moment is what's happening in Nigeria. Voters there having chosen a former military ruler and anti-corruption campaigner to lead their country. That is how the Wall Street Journal is looking at that development.
China Daily reports that 46 countries have joined or applied to join the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is seen as a rival to the World Bank.
India's Business Standard reports Alibaba founder Jack Ma is eyeing India's e-commerce sector and will visit the country later this month.
And the Financial Times reports that Hewlett-Packard is suing the co-founder of Autonomy for $5 billion over an alleged fraud connected with HP's takeover of the British software group. And earlier we took a look at the day's papers with Virginie Maisonneuve, who is Deputy Chief Investment Officer at PIMCO. We began with the negotiations over Iran's nuclear program.
Interestingly, both the French and the Chinese delegation left and said, at least the French delegation said, you know, if something happens, call us back. The Chinese delegation didn't really say this. So I think the key thing here is clearly the level of adjustment of the sanctions and the rules around, you know, nuclear and the ability to build nuclear arms. And it's a very long negotiation, but hopefully it will come out to a positive outcome. Yeah.
In a way, it's not surprising it's taken so long because there are so many different global interests. Let's take Israel, for example, which doesn't want Iran to be a part of the world system at all, it seems. Israel says that this is seen as rewarding Iran's aggression. Then there's Saudi Arabia, which that Sunni-Shia debate that's been going on now for some time. The Saudis want, it seems, to keep Iran suppressed. But so many other people believe that Iran should slowly be allowed back. It's a very important, very influential country.
Yeah, and I think the key is absolutely right. If you look at it with this fragmentation that we're seeing expressed in the Middle East, not only around Sunni and Shia, but also fragmentation that, in my view, is partially brought by lower oil prices. I think Iran is a big piece of that in terms of trying to stabilize the region. But it means that it is very difficult. You also have clearly the Russian interest here, and the article that you have here was really portraying Russia as the leader in terms of trying to bring things together. Which is it's an interesting angle.
So we're talking about oil.
Yes.
Africa's largest producer of oil is featured on the Wall Street Journal because Muhammadu Buhari, who, it mustn't be forgotten, for 20 months was the military ruler of Nigeria, but now he says he's found democracy and he's actually unseated the incumbent, Goodluck Jonathan, who has conceded with grace as well, it has to be said.
Yeah. So a couple of things here. The last transition we had was a little bit deadly. The article talks about that, and clearly we hope that this time, I think it was close to 900 deaths that we had at that time. That's not the case. But again, if you extract yourself, this role of fragmentation with Boko Haram being part of that and polarization, you know, is still there as a theme. And of course, the oil divide. Again, with lower oil prices, since, as you point out, it's a big oil producing country, you know, there are pressure and population probably feel that they need more spreading of the wealth. And I think that's a very important theme that we're seeing throughout the world and interestingly impacting a lot of elections or movements, let's call it this way, if there are no elections.
I mean, this article talks about the fact that they describe it, you know, former military dictator, anti-corruption crusader is another term that they use here. Hopes are high, aren't they, that a lot will be sorted out, but actually the challenges are pretty steep too.
Yeah, and I think the population around this Boko Haram movement is probably a reaction to that as well, with this kind of political, you know, theme of anti-corruption that will have probably attracted a lot of people.
Where's the money coming from for this China Daily article that talks about this new Asian Infrastructure Development Bank? Where are they going to get the money from? Is it going to be private equity, governments funding it?
So what they're saying, and at this point, you know, we don't have the full detail of it, is that there will be 29 members who will, you know, be paying members. The rules will be set by mid-year, end-year setup. And as you said in your introduction, it is seen as a rival in the global stage. And if you look at China clearly with the enormous rise that it's had in terms of economic power, it hasn't had a similar increase of its geopolitical power. And China has always been really preoccupied, at least in my view in the last 10 years, to have an influence on world affairs. And I think that is its way of doing this. Now, clearly, what's interesting in this article is, one of the rebuffs that the US had was around environmental issues and social issues. And in this article, they're specifically addressing that they'll be, spending time and be careful about those two issues.
But Europe was banging the door down, wasn't it?
Yes.
To make sure they were founding members. Germany, France, UK, Italy. They're all in there. Yeah. They don't want to be left out of this particular development bank.
I think it's an important one. Part of the parallel project is also to redevelop the Silk Road and to try to bring, if you want, the old trading route, develop it more. And I think it could be quite interesting, actually.
India's business standard, and I suppose if Jack Ma wants to take, I don't know if it'll be called Alibaba, actually Alibaba would be more appropriate for the subcontinent than it is for China, but if he wants to get into India, he must be confident that there are enough people there who are going to be using his websites to buy trade products.
Yes, so I think I have a lot of respect for Jack Ma. I think he's a fantastic businessman. And, if you just look between now and 2025, by 2025, India will be the size of China. And clearly, once you pass the $3,000 per capita, consumer discretionary spending accelerates quite dramatically. And I think, this is going to take a long time. If, in fact, like the article mentions, there's possibly an acquisition or a deal being in the process. He wants to look at B2B, he wants to look at logistics, he wants to look at payment. Mobile payment is probably very timely. In a lot of economies now people sort of jump ahead and do that. So I think it would be very, very interesting.
Certainly will be. That was Virginie Maisonneuve from PIMCO talking us through the stories in the press and across social media.
Indeed. Live in Nigeria and Lausanne in the next half an hour. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Dubai may have the world's tallest building, but what goes up sometimes also comes down.
People that couldn't afford to buy properties were buying properties.
Dubai's property market slumped in 2008, but is it now rebuilding and scaling new heights?
It is an amazing blend of the best of the East and West.
Join me, Mark Lobel, for Why Buy in Dubai on BBC World News.
Working with professional and equal business partners creates a stronger confidence. Right across the land of opportunity, confidence and harmony, with a strong and growing economy, a young, expanding middle class, talented human capital. And a huge market to achieve higher levels of success with abundant opportunities together. Invest in remarkable Indonesia.
Hello there. Some pretty big contrasts in weather conditions across North America. We've got almost heatwave conditions across the southwest corner. Here, temperatures a little above average for the time of year. Cool and showery across the Pacific Northwest and in towards British Columbia. These weather systems pushing towards central Canada on Wednesday on into Thursday. Warm, humid air moving up off the Gulf of Mexico, generating some pretty big thunderstorms across the deep south in towards the Tennessee Valley. And it remains quite cool, but largely dry across the northeast corner. Temperatures around 10 or 11 degrees for New York on Wednesday. Now we're seeing conditions improving across much Patagonia and also parts of northern Chile. More sunshine here, further outbreaks of rain across the south, and torrential downpours continuing through central southern parts of Africa, in particular Botswana, in towards Angola, with the risk of more flooding. 22 degrees there for Cape Town on Thursday, close to 30 Celsius there for Cairo. Largely fine and settled through the Middle East after the recent storms that we've had. Most of the storm activity will be clearing out of Iran in towards Afghanistan on Thursday, and potentially more showers pushing in towards the Levant region because that's an area of low pressure in the eastern Mediterranean. 42 Celsius in Muscat on Thursday. It really is quite hot. The central southern parts of India and in towards the north, and for southern Pakistan, a lot of sunshine on Thursday. Big storms, northern Pakistan, in towards the northeast of India for Assam and for Bangladesh, and some thunderstorms breaking out across the south of India in towards Sri Lanka too. But 40 Celsius there for Nagpur, so that spring sunshine really is quite hot at the moment. Now we're looking at Typhoon Maisak there, which has brought some damage and destruction to the Micronesian islands. It's continuing to move westwards in towards the Philippine Sea on Thursday. By the weekend, it could make landfall across the north of the Philippines. One system to watch here. Further unsettled weather pushing towards the Korean Peninsula to end the week. We're seeing some thunderstorms and showers across Queensland in towards New South Wales, and settled conditions clearing away from Tasmania. It will be cold there, though, on Thursday.
What exactly is going to make you want to buy a smartwatch? Well, ultimately, it's the apps and what you can do with them. So, I've been taking a look at the latest crop of available smartwatches to see which apps are going to be the ones that will make me want to buy. Now, these two watches, the LG G Watch R and the Moto 360, both run on Android Wear, so they can be used on any platform paired with an Android device that's running 4.3 and above. Now, they both look like watches, but for my money, they're a bit masculine, really, to wear as a woman, even if you do put a pretty watch face on them. But they do both have heart rate monitors and activity trackers, so can be used as part of your fitness regime. Certainly the most useful thing about having a smartwatch is the ability to access certain basic features of your smartphone without taking it out of your bag, like getting notifications and sending messages and emails. OK, Google, send email. Spencer Kelly. If you're in a car, you can activate turn-by-turn navigation using your voice, but you do need to have your phone out if you want to be able to see the map directions. Bring is useful for making a shopping list with another person, and you can tick items off as you go. And Stowcard has seriously lightened my purse with the ability to add loyalty cards to your watch and have them scanned straight off the screen. Depending on how much you use them, both these watches should last the average user a day, but you will need to put them on their charging stations every night, otherwise the next day, no watch. If you've got an iPhone, your only smartwatch option right now is the Pebble. Now, you remember these guys came out a few years ago and really kick-started the whole smartwatch phenomenon with a highly successful crowdfunding campaign. Now, for my money, they look much better on a female wrist, much more wearable than the Android Wear devices. However, can't interact with them via touch, and hello Pebble, hello Pebble, hello Pebble. Pretty dumb when it comes to voice controls. You can customise the watch face to make it look how you want with Modern Watch Face. I particularly like this design. The other really useful thing, if you want your phone to tell you things like the sporting results or perhaps a note that you've recorded or even the weather, then cards will let you set up different settings depending on what's particularly useful to you. Shopping lists can be done on the Pebble using an app like Evernote, which does everything else you'd expect Evernote to do. You can find the shop or any other place around you using the app Yelp. And then, oh, hang on a minute, I've got a tweet coming in. I'm getting that through Tweble, which pushes my tweets to my wrist. And it looks like my friends are meeting at a coffee shop just around the corner. Luckily, I've got GPS Copilot, which will show me the way. Excuse me, mustache. Before I do go, though, I just want to tell you one big benefit of these Pebble watches is the 5 to 8 day battery life, making them much more usable for a day-to-day wearable.
For the times of the full-length Click this weekend, log on to our website, bbc.com/click.
Did you help deliver my baby?
Yes, I did.
So you held my baby
remember.
in your hands?
Yes.
Until today, they didn't know whether he was alive or dead.
I feel ashamed, absolutely. I don't have words to say how I feel.
You got shot through the heart.
Through the heart.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm not kind of dressed like that, no. I'm not.
Our World is a unique series of films on the BBC, offering personal insights into global events. Our World, stories that speak for themselves.